All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It is Tuesday, and you know what that means. Time to do the Tao now, diving further into Dr. Wayne W. Dyer's Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, living the wisdom of the Tao, and going through every verse of the Tao Te Ching and giving us a deeper understanding and a greater awareness of a way that we can attempt to apply and use this wisdom from 2,500 years ago, coming to us from Lao-tzu, one of the great spiritual masters and one of the great teachers. And, it's just mind-blowing to try to think of how back then he came to these levels of understanding and awareness and of observation of harmony and nature and the nature of reality and our own lives and society, and how he could have understood it at a level that we can now, even today, 2,500 years later, try to apply this into our lives. And as we have seen throughout this series, ladies and gentlemen, that it is very applicable to our lives today. Even though we live in much different times than Lao Tzu did, each one of these lessons and teachings can help us to change our lives and to change the way that we see the world, and so that we can increase the quality of our experience. Hope you got yourself some tea, ladies and gentlemen, or a cold beverage of your choice. And I hope you're comfy, because we are about to dive into the 79th verse of the Tao Te Ching, entitled Living Without Resentments. Now, that's Dr. Wayne W. Dyer's title. It is simply just entitled the 79th verse. Living without resentments, though, ladies and gentlemen, that is a deep topic. Going beyond resentment, how you can let go of your resentment, possibly. Lao Tzu says someone must risk returning injury with kindness, or hostility will never turn to goodwill. Very deep, very fascinating. Before we dive into the 79th verse, the T today, ladies and gentlemen, says, let your enemy be used to build, not destroy. Very interesting, and I feel that might be very fitting with today's lesson from the 79th verse of the Tao Te Ching on letting go, or living without resentment. The tea is tasting extra good. Thank you so much for those of you joining me here today. And without further ado, let's dive into the 79th verse of the Tao Te Ching. It begins by saying, after a bitter quarrel, some resentment remains. What can one do about it? Being content with what you have is always best in the end. Someone must risk returning injury with kindness, or hostility will never turn to goodwill. So the wise always give without expecting gratitude. One with true virtue always seeks a way to give. One who lacks true virtue always seeks a way to get. To the giver comes the fullness of life. To the taker, just an empty hand. And that concludes the 79th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Very powerful, ladies and gentlemen. And this one, I think, is less mystical than some of his verses, less, out there in the clouds and tough to understand ideas. This makes perfect sense. Should make perfect sense to those of us here. One with true virtue always seeks a way to give. One who lacks true virtue. So what is this virtue that Lao Tzu is referring to? Well, I think it's what we've discovered in previous 78 verses of the Tao Te Ching. And so if you missed any of that, be sure to go back in the series, because we've been doing this for a year and a half now or longer, ladies and gentlemen. Hard to believe it's already June. June 13th, ladies and gentlemen, 2023 at 12 p.m. And here we are. And we are here. Just think of the time. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So let's dive into what Dr. Wayne W. Dyer has to teach us about this idea that's being discussed here in the 79th verse. Because I'm sure many of us ask this question after a bitter quarrel, an argument, a misunderstanding. Some resentment remains. Like you didn't get the victory, or you didn't feel like you got your point across, or whatever it may be. And so what can one do about it? It almost makes me if one of the people in Lao-tzu's life asked him this question while he was at this point in writing the Tao Te Ching. So what can one do about it? And he says that the way to solve this, for yourself at least, is being content with what you have. And that is always best in the end. And you have to run the risk, he furthers, by returning what someone has done to you, which is quote unquote injury, hopefully not physical harm, but something that would cause a little bit of resentment, whether it be a disagreement or something like that. It's so bright today, but it's actually not outside. It's overcast and raining like it has been here. Hope the weather's beautiful where you are, ladies and gentlemen, but despite the weather, it's always a beautiful day. That's what I love to say. So risk returning this, whatever caused your resentment, with the opposite, with kindness. And why should we risk this? Well, because that hostility, that resentment, will never go away if we do not. And so the wise, he continues, give without expecting something in return, which could also cause resentment. You're constantly giving and expecting things in return the whole time, then that can cause resentment. But if you give without expectations, and even gratitude, see, this is something I think we often overlook when people say, in these spiritual philosophies, that you should give without expecting things in return. I think often we think, like something tangible, like money, or something similar to what it is that we gave to get back. Like if you give somebody a book, you're expecting them to give you one back. Even gratitude, we cannot be expecting. And that is a small thing, because often when you do give something, you receive gratitude. And it feels good. It makes you feel like, yes. And that is what, the great gift of giving is feeling this gratitude. But even that, as Lao-tzu is teaching, we should not be expecting. It's great to receive it, as it is great to receive anything else in return. But this expectation, ladies and gentlemen, can lead to this resentment or this lack of quote unquote goodwill. And so one with true virtue, once again, to finish up before we dive into what Wayne says, one with true virtue always seeks this way to give. And the giver without expectations, even gratitude, and, people being thankful. When he gives and does not ask for attention, does not tell someone about it, oh, look what I have done, but just goes about his business, comes to the fullness of life. And that Wouldn't that be great for all of us, ladies and gentlemen, to attain the fullness of life? But I think we are there. And I think this is it. It's just a matter of us being able to change the way that we look at things. And then the things that we look at and experience, which is our life, will change. And then we will realize that we are there. And we do have this fullness of life. We just weren't seeing it the whole time. And so, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive into the words of Dr. Wayne W. Dyer, Living Without Resentments. He begins by saying, quote, "In this verse, which has been so helpful to me personally, you are asked to change the way we are asked, ladies and gentlemen, I am asked, and each and every one of us out here, whether you're watching this video or listening or I don't know any other way you could be experiencing this video, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for being here. And if you're getting value, consider subscribing. But we are asked to change the way that we hold on to resentments, following a difference of opinion or an outright quarrel. So you're asked to change the way you hold resentments following a difference of opinion or an outright quarrel. Now, what causes annoyance and anger after a dispute? I mean, what causes this? And it is interesting, actually, to sit back and think of that, because not often after a dispute or an argument, disagreement, do you then come back to a place of centered, this is what we should do, come back to a place of peace and realize that anger is the only true enemy. No one else out there. This is a great teaching. If you don't get anything else, anger is the true enemy. And often when you can defeat the anger, the person that you thought was your enemy is no longer your enemy. And even more interesting and paradoxical, when you've defeated the anger, some of the times that enemy becomes a great friend. Whoever it was that you were quote unquote battling with. Now, leave that lesson there. I love that lesson though, about anger being the true enemy. And so what is it though that causes this annoyance and anger after a dispute or during a dispute or leading up to a dispute, ladies and gentlemen? The generic response, Wayne continues, would be a laundry list that's detailed why the other person was wrong and how illogically and unreasonably they behaved, and concluding with something like, I have a right to be upset when my fill in the blank, Wayne says daughter, mother-in-law, ex-husband, boss, or whomever you're thinking of speaks to me that way. But if you're interested, which is why we're here, in living a Tao-filled life, a God-centered life, a life in harmony with the universe, with reality, creating just greater harmony in general, it's imperative that you reverse this kind of thinking. I'll also say, if you want to get into the art of, or the science of lucky people, or what some call manifesting or creating miracles in your life, through this alignment with the force, God, the Tao, then we need to begin applying these spiritual philosophies and great wisdom of the ages into our life. And we will experience a much higher quality of life because we will have a changed awareness and understanding of the nature of reality that we find ourselves in. And so it's important that we reverse this kind of thinking that we have always been taught to, or, maybe just have, because so often, I think when we're children, we learn through osmosis, and what we see, the rest of society doing is what we think is what everybody should be doing, and what we begin doing. And we carry on a lot of silly things that are very common, you know, common to our own human nature. And we don't ever get to these deeper philosophical levels at a mass scale for enough of us to change the way that we behave in our lives in order to create a much higher quality of experience for not only ourselves, but everybody around us. But this is what some people, ladies and gentlemen, would refer to as, what I'm always talking about is this increasing of the level of the consciousness of all of us over time, and a rise and a fall through the golden ages and the dark ages in the cycles of our history. But, ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, we are here today trying to learn how we can do that, increase our understanding. And so resentments, Wayne continues, do not come from the conduct of the other party in an altercation. No. They survive and thrive because you are unwilling to end that altercation with an offering of kindness, with an offering of love, and authentic forgiveness. Now, I don't know if he's going to get there, but there's two things. We'll see if I can get to them without getting off track like I normally do, but this falls right in line, and this is something that Wayne Dyer teaches. And it's like, you don't die from a snake bite. I'm going to see, I already forgot the second thing. That's how my mind works. But that's one of them. You don't die from a snake bite, ladies and gentlemen. And what does that mean? It's the venom that courses through your veins, that continues to stay within you. And this is a metaphor for resentment and having a hate or holding on to toxic feelings because it doesn't hurt the other party. Resentment in an altercation, as Wayne was saying, does not come from the other person. Even though we like to think that, oh, it's their fault that I feel this way. But really, it's nobody's fault that we feel anyway. It is our fault because that is the way that we choose to feel and react about the situation. And because we've never been taught that we have this power to control our minds and our emotions and our actions. Now, I'm not saying that that is easy, because our emotions are often like storms. They just happen. But then it comes to, what do we do and what have we learned about what we can do to influence in a positive direction our emotional state through maybe some breathing exercises, or, there's many different things that we can learn to do to have control in a reactive sense, in a responsive sense, having an ability to respond with ability to those quote unquote storms that happen unexpectedly in our lives and in our bodies with floods of emotions. And so it is not the snake bite that kills you. It is the venom that continues to course through your body. And it is not, it's not the argument or the other person or, this idea of what Wayne was talking to, where resentments resentments do not come from the conduct of the other party in altercation. They survive and thrive in you, in us, ladies and gentlemen, if we allow them, because we are unwilling to end the altercation and let go of the resentment with an offering of kindness, love, and authentic forgiveness. Lao-tzu says, quote, someone must risk returning injury with kindness, or this hostility, this venom that will kill you. Resentment is very poisonous to the body, and that might sound silly to those of you who do not know about the biology of a belief, but that is very real and has been studied for many years with a lot of research to back it up. So if you don't know about how your beliefs and your thoughts and your feelings can affect your physical body and your health, then be sure to research that maybe even before this, ladies and gentlemen, because then that will actually make you want to change your thoughts, to change your life. If you're somebody who's here listening to me this far in the video already, then I love and appreciate you and thank you so much for being here, but you must be seeking after something. And I think that is the most important step to actually realize the power of positive thinking. And that book that is titled The Power of Positive Thinking, I don't think quite describes what it is that I'm trying to get at right here, and how that positive thinking literally affects your biochemistry in a way that where the emotions and the feelings and the way that you take in your life experience because of the biochemical state that you're in will change the quality of the experience because of the type of filters that our minds and our bodies work with. Like sometimes when you're angry, you're not going to see the beauty of the cotton, coming off the cottonwood trees flying through the air. You're going to be pissed off that there's cotton flying through the air. And see, isn't it interesting how the same exact thing can be viewed through two different lenses of a totally opposite nature? And one lens will lead us to experiencing a terrible world with probably a terrible physical experience as well. Anyways, illness in the mind leading to illness in the body is what I was getting at with that point. See, I keep getting off subject here, ladies and gentlemen. But resentments do not come from the other party. They survive in us because we're unwilling to do what it takes to try to be, they always say, be the bigger man, be the better man or woman, ladies and gentlemen. But they never really explain that in detail in a deep way so that that really resonates with why we should want to do that. And so I think the reason why I got into that ramble is finding out some of those things can actually give you a really a great push and a great passion and desire, which is what I have felt for many years, learning that this is real, these things that we have discussed here for the last 2 years on this channel, is that there is actually a way that you can change your thoughts and change your life. And you can have a good life without being a rich, super success. I mean, all of this stuff is relative, ladies and gentlemen, when you find out that the biggest entrepreneurs and CEOs or, the luckiest, trust fund inheritance people that just have all the money and seem to have everything that those of us who are out here struggling want, but then they experience the same depression and sadness. And sometimes and often much more worse ways because they're no longer depressed, they don't have enough money, but they're upset about a lot of other things. And so with that ramble, maybe being upset about not having enough money is better because it keeps us from being upset about a whole lot of other things. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're getting value and let us continue. And so with that being said, we must risk returning injury with kindness, or hostility will never turn to goodwill. We'll never get rid of the poison, of the venom. Because if you can get the venom out of the snake bite real quick, then you're just fine and it heals up over time. You might have a little swelling. But wouldn't that be better than a lifetime worth of resentment, ladies and gentlemen? Or, So, when all of the yelling, Wayne continues, screaming and threatening words have been expressed, that makes me think of the second thing that I was trying to remember earlier. So the first one was the snake bite and the venom. Once you learn that philosophy, then the second thing is that, let me count it, 5 words, ladies and gentlemen. There are 5 words that will solve any argument. And there are powerful 5 words. And all right, are you ready? You are right about that. Now, I mean, this might seem crazy. And I laughed really hard the first time I heard this because Wayne knows how to deliver a speech and get an audience to laugh. But I mean, just think about the comedy in that, ladies and gentlemen, about how in the middle of any argument, and you just give the other people, because what we're looking for, I think, when we're in an argument or a dispute, is we want to be right. We want to have the victory. And we not only want to be right and have the victory, and we want to feel that the other person is conceding to us being right and that they have lost. Because when you feel right, but the other person is like, yeah, we can agree to disagree, you don't get that ego victory that our ego mind is looking for. The non-spiritual part of us, ladies and gentlemen, that always wants to be the best and be the rightest and get the most and win and, you know, get more, keep striving. You'll never have enough. This non-spiritual part of us. But remember, the ego makes an excellent servant, just a terrible master. So as long as you're your own spiritual master, be your own master, be your own guide, and be your own guru, ladies and gentlemen. Master your own ascension, guide your own spirit, and be your own guru. And ask questions and question answers. Shout out to Jeff. That's what he used to say. Those are good catchphrases. But this idea that you could use those 5 words, like, you know, I really don't like, shouldn't be doing these. This is ridiculous. You know, you're right about that. I mean, even if you're not feeling that way, if you can pull it off and say it, I haven't tried it a lot, but you know, try this out, ladies and gentlemen. Wayne Dyer recommended it, and he spoke to millions of people, so I'm sure that it works. But isn't that funny, ladies and gentlemen? And that's a good thing to keep in mind about the ego victory when it comes to an argument. And you know, a difference of opinion in an outright quarrel when it comes to leading to resentments and anger. And so if we can let go of our ego position of wanting to have the victory and just say, you are right about that. And the funniest one, I think I might have said this on this series before, but you know, he's having the family over for Christmas or, you know, holiday occasion. They say, you know, I really don't like the way you decorate this thing like that and have that set out on the table. You should probably do it a little bit differently. And Wayne goes, well, you know, you're right about that. And the, you know, the in-law or whatever says, oh, okay, well, you know, they're kind of surprised he just gave in and agreed. Normally people want to argue about these kind of things when you have a difference of opinion. But see, when you're above this, like Wayne says, he's like, I was feeling like a spiritual master, he says. Because you are right about that. And the guy says, well, really? Like, all right, so you're going to do it differently next year? He says, no, probably not, but you are right about that. Oh, I love that one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let us continue with the words of Dr. Dyer. And so when we can risk returning this injury with kindness, we can begin to move on and get past this resentment and anger. And so when all of the yelling and screaming and threatening words have been expressed, the time for calm has arrived. Remember that no storm lasts forever. Not even nature can sustain a forced action. That was a previous verse and teaching of the Tao Te Ching. Teaching us, it's funny that I use the storm reference on the rainy day here, and then he brings it up. But remember those things in our lives that can be the storms of emotion, that we can eventually create the ability through practice to be able to respond with ability to, with some gusto, as Alan Watts put it. And so remember that no storm lasts forever. And that hidden within are always the seeds of tranquility. And there is a time for hostility and a time for peace, which is the hardest lesson for me to get, because I'm one of those guys that's like, all right, how can we figure out the way to be happy all the time? And that would create an imbalance in your own reality, because that would be out of alignment with natural law and the functioning laws of the universe, which we learn about on Wednesdays on Wednesday Wisdom, diving into the ancient wisdom of the ages, currently into the Hermetica. But, ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, no storm lasts forever. Not even nature under heaven can sustain a forced action. And so remember that within these storms and these times of hostility that are unfortunately part of the balance of the yin and the yang, and the positive and the negative poles of reality that make up the oneness, the one experience, so that when we're sitting here saying, this is a terrible experience and this is a great experience, the true master, or those who are out of time and space, would look down and say, well, maybe, I mean, it's all great, or however you want to look at it, because it is all one thing in the long scheme of things when you're not actually inside of the experience, going through the continuum of duality. That might have been kind of deep, but I hope you know what I mean by that. I get all that from researching deeper mystical philosophies. Well, and a lot of that was in this philosophy of the Tao. So once again, if you missed any previous episodes of this series, be sure to go back and check it out, because we've gone down these rabbit holes, ladies and gentlemen. And so this has been a fantastic one. I really didn't think that we would get into so many wonderful topics. Like that bit there could have gone into this idea of the old Zen story of where a man has a son, and the son, I forget exactly how it goes, but simply like the son breaks his leg, and the neighbor says, oh, how misfortunate, how terrible. And the Zen master says, well, maybe. And the man goes, what? And and eventually then the army comes out to draft the firstborn sons. And so the neighbor's son goes, and the Zen master's son, is not drafted because he has a broken leg. And the neighbor says, what great fortune you have. How amazing. And the Zen master says, well, maybe. And there's about 5 or 6 of those times where the neighbor is always like, oh, this is either really terrible or really great fortune for you. And the Zen master sees that it is neither. It's really all just maybe. Because one thing leads to the next, and there is a balancing and a harmony in reality. That the negative and the positive poles of things seem to blend together in the yin and yang symbol, ladies and gentlemen, meaning much more than just, that's the thing about symbology. Great symbols can really mean a million things. But there is a time for hostility and there is a time for peace. And so we must remember that within these storms of emotion and anger and resentment in our life, that there is a beautiful day waiting at the end of the storm, because not even nature, not even, if you want to call nature God, not even the universe can do this thing, which would be sustaining a forced action or being one way all the time. As the storm of a quarrel subsides, Wayne continues, you must find a way to disregard your ego's need to be right. Let's see if he says it this time. He might not get to the whole ego debate thing earlier. But anyways, the secret, ladies and gentlemen, of what we need to do is understand what our ego is trying to do and what our ego is. And I mean, that goes into philosophy and, what is it called? I'm not going to remember it, but Sigmund Freud and all of those guys. Um, do, 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 do. After a quarrel subsides, you must find a way to disregard your ego's need to be right, your want to win. It's time to extend kindness, Wayne continues, by letting go of your anger. It's over. So offer forgiveness to yourself and the other person and encourage resentment to dissipate. Be the one seeking a way to give. Back to the verse and Lao-tzu and his wisdom on this idea of how do we get rid of this resentment, master? The student came to him and said, after a bitter quarrel and some resentment remains, what can one do about it? And so this is the teaching we're getting, ladies and gentlemen. Be the one seeking a way to give. To give maybe the ego victory, like we said. You're right about that. Or maybe in the sense that Lao-tzu describes, as Wayne continues in this verse, rather than the one looking for something to get. Wayne says, I run a large enterprise based on the wisdom in this profound verse. My company is all about giving. So if there are any disputes about product sales, my assistant knows to let the other party have whatever they desire. If someone can't afford something, I give it away. I allow recordings of my talks and ask nothing in return. I give of my time for photographs, autographs, or anything at all. Unless I have a plane to catch, I'm the last person out of the auditorium, and I'm willing to talk with anybody who makes such a request. It's all about giving, ladies and gentlemen. And those who work for me now know this and live by these principles. When he said the bit there, I allow recordings of my talks and ask nothing for them in return. It made me think about the, all of the hundreds, probably thousands of hours that I've listened to Wayne Dyer in his recordings. And I'm thinking like, man, there really was a lot of that. Enough for me to listen to it for years and still be going on today. I mean, I've listened to quite a few things over and over again, but there's still a ton of stuff I haven't heard that were his recordings. I mean, I haven't even read half of his books. He had 30 or more. Prolific. Shout out to you, Wayne. Shout out to you. You're probably here with me now. Like he said, he had a picture of Lao-tzu like up above his desk, and he would sit there and try to like channel this wise spiritual master through looking at the image into his work while he was writing this book that we've been doing in this series on Tuesday Tao. And so, regardless, he continues, of anybody else's attitude, if you live with true virtue, then you will seek a way to give and you will experience the fullness of life. But with that being said, when I asked an outsider, he says, to be a part of my speaking tour, not long ago, I encountered a man who was a tremendously gifted musician, an entertainer, yet was living in scarcity. Ladies and gentlemen, we've talked about abundance and scarcity before. Despite his enormous talent, scarcity meaning thinking you don't have enough and you always need more. Despite his enormous talent, abundance just wasn't flowing into his life. After a few of our speaking dates, I noticed his inclination to be a taker rather than a giver. So this is a lesson on manifesting and creating abundance in your life, ladies and gentlemen. When you are a taker rather than a giver, he consistently looked for ways to make more money on the side, excluding everyone else who was working to provide a service to those who attended the lectures. I had a long discussion with this man about how his profiteering rather than offering was blocking the flow of abundance into his life. Hopefully you're getting this lesson, ladies and gentlemen, because this is most important when it comes to abundance. And I encouraged him to trust in the wisdom that Lao-tzu provides. The point here is that this was an opportunity for us to both proceed on the tour without resentment and become being the giver and experiencing more of what Lao-tzu described as, quote unquote, the fullness of life. And so, regardless of anyone else's attitude, Wayne continues, if you live with true virtue, you will seek a way to give. This truth completely aligns with the Tao. After all, the creator of life is always giving. I mean, think of the sun. Think of the sun, ladies and gentlemen, as an example for being something that is constantly giving and never asking for anything in return. And it gives and creates everything that we see and experience here. And if you get into astrotheology and astrology and ancient mysticism, then the sun in the spiritual realm is, because, you know, they had these mirrors. This might be off subject for a second, but they had these philosophical mirror image. So like the sun is the physical image of the, you know, the spiritual God, which is the creator God. But this idea of giving, the truth completely aligns with the great wisdom of the ages and great spiritual teachings throughout our entire history, ladies and gentlemen, that if you want to change your life and even experience less anger and less resentment and experience more abundance, then offer love, offer kindness in place of those things, and begin to truly feel the question, how may I serve? Now, this is powerful. Lots of people know the power of that sentiment, how may I serve? Oftentimes before I start these videos, I make that one request. Like right before I press record, I'll close my eyes and go, take a deep breath. How may I serve? It's like, help me to deliver this in a way that will help somebody else. Because when I go about this whole process here of trying to get the most views and, you know, to get the most clicks and all the YouTube, whatever, to try to get for myself, then it sucks. I don't know how to do it. You know, I'm like trying to be perfect and worried about how many times I itch my face or my eyebrows and say, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, and ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I mean, like, if I was worried about all that stuff, I wouldn't feel so free to just have a good time with those of you that actually want to be here, seeking after the wisdom of the Tao and trying to actually learn how to change your thoughts and change your life. And so hopefully that's working in the way that I trust that it will, without trying to, you know, win or be the best or be the greatest. You know what I mean? It's just like, have a good time and trust that that's going to do better. I mean, consistency is the key anyways, ladies and gentlemen. So don't worry about being perfect at any of this. Just worry about practicing. Because practice day to day is the real way. I like that. Practice day to day is the real way to succeed. It's not like there's going to be some great performance, despite the Nuggets winning the world championship last night. Yes. But it was an entire journey, ladies and gentlemen, of many years of continuity and practice, and dedication, diligence. I really like the word disciple because to me it means a lifestyle of discipline. But with all of my rambling there, regardless of anyone else's attitude, if you live with true virtue, which means you'll seek a way to give, then you will experience a much greater quality of life, ladies and gentlemen. This truth completely aligns with the Tao. The creator of life is always giving, never taking. So change the way that you think about scarcity and anger and resentment, and begin to truly feel the question, how may I serve? The universe will seem to respond, actually, when you do this, which is very magical. See, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can learn about all of these, new spiritual ways of living. I learned most of it from Wayne Dyer and all the other references like David Hawkins and Sheldon Moore from Remember Zen, Awaken the Buddha Nature Within, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Matt Belair, Zen Athlete. I mean, so many others during this wonderful journey that has been my life. Hopefully, it's been wonderful for you too, ladies and gentlemen. But it's all about perspective. Like we were saying earlier, you can look at the same exact thing and have two totally opposite opinions. So, you got your perspective. Don't you just want to be happy? I do. But as we learned also earlier, there's that wouldn't be right because it wouldn't be balanced. There are times for both unhappiness and happiness. The universe, though, will seem to respond when you do this new way of thinking about, experiencing, and looking at your life, the new way of thinking about scarcity and resentment and everything else that we've been taught in these 80 verses of the Tao Te Ching so far, well, 78 on 79 today. And you will notice the universe actually responding, which is your first hint that you are on to the magic of manifesting or creating your life on purpose. When you start seeing these hints. And so, how may I serve? Finally, you got it. You're acting like me, the universe says, God says, the Tao says, the Force. Grand organized design, great spirit. I'll keep that flowing, coming into your life in ways that will astound and delight you, as long as you can stay in harmony with the way, the Tao translating to the way, which to me translates to like a harmony, to living in alignment with certain principles and archetypes of God. It's so hard for even me to describe, ladies and gentlemen, but it's this process of like living in a new way to where you're no longer doing all of these non-spiritual things, like, you're living in a way to where you're more in a oneness with the world rather than feeling closed off and separate, and you have to win and beat everything else. It's hard to explain, but we've talked about it nonstop on this channel for forever, so hopefully you get where I'm getting at there, ladies and gentlemen. As Lao-tzu says, to the giver comes the fullness of life, to the taker just an empty hand. So if we can discover and understand the science of lucky people, which is the spiritual alignment process, to begin creating real magic and manifesting in our life what it is that we want to experience. Also considering dharma and karma, two different things there. that is, set up for us to experience. But if we are able to go through the things that we are supposed to suffer from without actually suffering too much at all, but still learning the lesson, then that, ladies and gentlemen, sounds good to me. Because I'm down to learn the lessons I need to learn here. But I also want to learn how I can suffer less during these challenges that most of us suffer so much through in this life. So here's what Lao-tzu, ladies and gentlemen, encourages us to do. Coming from Dr. Wayne W. Dyer and Lao-tzu to you through me today, ladies and gentlemen. Here's what Lao-tzu encourages you to do to make the wisdom of this 79th verse your reality. Number one, ladies and gentlemen, on how we can get rid of the resentment and anger. End on love, no matter what. End on love. So picture yourself at the termination of a quarrel or a major dispute. Rather than reacting with old patterns of residual anger, resentment, revenge, and hurt, visualize offering. Just visualize. You don't even have to do it, outwardly. Just visualize offering kindness and love and forgiveness. Do this right now by sending out these true virtue thoughts. So see, we learned what the virtue is, to any resentments that you are currently carrying. And get the venom out of you. And keep the poison from coursing through your veins. And continuing, ladies and gentlemen, and no longer die from a snake bite. Because it's not the snake bite that gets you, it is the venom. And so make this your standard response to any further future altercations. I end on love, no matter what. And I will send an offering through my thoughts of kindness, love, and forgiveness. And because by sending out those thoughts of true virtue, you will clear yourself and you will feel so much better. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen. Number two, practice giving. In the midst of arguments or disagreements, practice giving rather than taking before you exit. Offer the Tao and the treasures of real virtues by presenting kindness rather than a put down, or a sign of respect instead of proving someone wrong and having to be right. Giving involves leaving the ego behind. This is why I love so much that little 5 words. You're right about that. It's like you are offering respect. You're offering them kindness. You're letting go of your ego need to win. While it wants to win and show its superiority by being contrary and disrespectful, our Tao nature, our alignment with the universe, with God, would be for us to be at peace and live in harmony. Ladies and gentlemen, you can reduce your quarreling time to almost zero if you begin to practice and practice and practice. I'm adding multiple practices here because, like we were saying, it's a discipline that you get better at over time and eventually becomes an accidental response. It becomes the way that you are. It becomes a habit to be in alignment with the Tao. So you can reduce your quarreling time to almost zero if we can practice and continue to live this procedure in this way. And the reason that you should get this book for yourself so that you can put it on your shelf is not only because there's so much great wisdom and so much great references, life-changing material that's easy to read. I made this sound very long here today, but really it was only a page and a half. So that's how much rambling you know that I do. But 2 pages maybe. But the reason you should get this for yourself, ladies and gentlemen, is because at the end there's a little tiny section that's easy to reference. I have this book linked in the description below. He calls it Do the Tao Now. And so this is why we called it Tuesday Tao. Doing the Tao, ladies and gentlemen, do the Tao now. So how can we practically apply this wisdom from 2,500 years ago? There are many translations from Lao-tzu down to Wayne Dyer's offering for us, and from what I've turned these words into here today, my translation of this teaching to you, ladies and gentlemen. But Wayne, how can we practically apply this wisdom into our lives? Well, do the Tao now. He says, silently recite the following words from the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Quote, where there is injury, let me bring pardon. I think the original says, let me sow pardon. Be a giver of forgiveness, as he teaches. Bring love to hate. Bring light to the darkness, ladies and gentlemen. And pardon to injury. Read these words daily, for they'll help us to overcome our ego's demands and know what Lao-tzu described as, quote unquote, the fullness of life, ladies and gentlemen. And that is a boom to wisdom and a boom to living the wisdom of the Tao and changing our thoughts and changing our life and getting rid of resentment and going beyond anger. And an ultimate spiritual lesson in that from the 79th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, that was powerful. A round of applause for that one. I wish I had a little applause button. Champions. And that was a champion teaching right there. I liked it. And I know you did as well. So, since you got value, consider subscribing. And also tap the like button, ladies and gentlemen. Because if you tap it twice, then it will unlike it. So if you tap it twice, tap it a third time. But the third time, you can smash it. But don't smash your phone either. I'm just having fun here, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you are too, because that was powerful. You can see how close we are to the end of this journey in the 81 verses of the Tao Te Ching, because next week we find ourselves on verse 80. Titled by Wayne, Living Your Own Utopia. How can we live our own utopia, ladies and gentlemen? Well, we've been on quite a journey. We've been on quite a journey. Oh, and there is an epilogue that we'll go through on its own episode. So that will be a fun little final bit there. But this has been fantastic, ladies and gentlemen, and I love and appreciate each and every one of you that spends time here with me and Dr. Wayne W. Dyer and Lao-tzu. All the wonderful, I got paintings falling on my feet at the moment. That's what I'm doing. All the wonderful authors and poets of the wisdom of the ages, ladies and gentlemen, just to remind you, that was this book, 60 Days to Enlightenment, although it took us about a year to go through that series, which is what we used to do on Wednesday, which is why we called it Wednesday Wisdom of the Ages. So if you missed this entire Wayne W. Dyer book that we read through the entire thing, be sure to check out those teachings as well. I mean, this is a beautiful and thoughtful book which features wisdom from 60 different ancestral masters, including Shakespeare, Buddha, Jesus, Mahatma Gandhi, I mean, Lao-tzu, as well as Michelangelo and Emily Dickinson, Mother Teresa, just some of the greatest authors and poets and mystics. Lewis Carroll, Herman Melville, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, William Wordsworth. That was a good one. So many good ones. Alexander Pope, John Donne, Shakespeare, Sir Edward Dyer, Jalaluddin Rumi, the Sufi poet, ladies and gentlemen. He says, I saw grief drinking a cup of sorrow and called out, it tastes sweet, doesn't it? You've caught me, grief answered, and you've ruined my business. How can I sell sorrow when you know it's a blessing? What a fitting end to this beautiful episode today, ladies and gentlemen. This might be one of my favorite episodes, but I've had so many. It's been such a fun journey. And so, all right. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, yeah. Remember to seek, to achieve, and maintain happiness through enlightenment. Seek to discover the wisdom of the ages and seek to discover a greater awareness and an understanding of the nature of reality. And seek to discover the mysteries and the wisdom of our history. And also remember, there is no way to happiness because happiness is the way. Sounds good and it's funny, but what that means is that happiness is actually an activity or an action that we bring to life. It's not actually a result. And hopefully I'll write that book one day. I have the first page over here, and so if we can begin to bring happiness to life, then all those things that we've been telling ourselves, oh, I'll be happy when I get there, if I have that much money, and I'm this kind of person, or all of that becomes irrelevant because then we are there. And then the entire journey becomes wonderful, hopefully. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I love and appreciate each and every one of you that spends time here with me, especially on the premieres and showing up in the live chat, because that really makes me feel the most support. And a shout out to A1 and Gorilla Press for me being my greatest supporters, I think, the longest standing and most consistent. And so it really means a lot to me that you would spend time here seeking after truth and trying to change our thoughts and change our lives and trying to create a greater awareness, a greater understanding of the nature of reality so that we can increase the quality of our experience, and not only our lives, but the lives of those around us, ladies and gentlemen. And hopefully we can be the change we want to see and set the example that we want to set. All right. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. Till tomorrow on Wednesday Wisdom. And I'll see you then. No, 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 no.